Welcome to Eternal Paradigm. Together, we're uncovering human experience by exploring physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual stories. With me, your host, Urmi Raval. Welcome to the Creativity series, where we explore creativity as a human experience. Hello, hi guys, welcome to Eternal Paradigm. I hope you're enjoying your journey to find you. So before I head into a quick roundup of what the episode is about, I just wanted to invite you to come along and join the Eternal Paradigm Facebook page. Facebook page? No, I should say Facebook group. You can see that none of this is scripted or particularly rehearsed. It's literally me talking into a mic because that's how things go. So just a quick invitation, really. Come and join us. Come and join us in the Facebook group. We currently have, I think it was 19 members, and I am incredibly proud of that. So come and join us, kind of find out what's going on. The other thing you can also do is check out the new website. So there are new things happening to the website too, and I will be telling you all about that in due course. But just to give you another heads up, the website is there. It's all up and running. Scroll through. You can contact me via the website. You can find out more about our guests because we're going to have bigger kind of guest profiles soon. There's a blog that's being currently worked on and added to the website. And you can also sign up to kind of, the newsletter. I don't even know if people actually call it a newsletter anymore. You can sign up for updates on what's happening on this side. And you can do that all from the website. And do that, guys. Head over there. I just want to also add that, this week has been quite an emotional week, so to speak, because I've actually been celebrating some of the podcast successes. And, I am wholly grateful to all of my guests who take the time out to come and talk to me and join me for such an open conversation about various different things, because I am quite inquisitive and a bit nosy, really. So it's always fun to have that conversation. I don't want to keep talking too much now because that's kind of not the point of this. So let me just recap on what's going on then. So this is now the second episode of the Creativity series. Yes, so I should have said that at the beginning now, I realized, but I didn't. So second episode of the Creativity series. And what we've done for this episode is actually put together for you the conversation that I had last month, I want to say, which was March, with Mike Bivens. And it was comic book make-believe and creativity, or creativity make-believe. Okay, I was there for this conversation. I really was, guys. We basically spoke about creativity, comic books, and make-believe. And we did this for what was previously called the PodVCon Spring Break. But now the whole PodVCon has rebranded to the Podcasters Collective. So that in itself was a lot of fun. The conversation with Mike was just absolutely amazing. And, I've connected with him because of his journey into, delving into comic books to really kind of showcase his connection with the creative aspect of him and this immensely fantastical world that he's created. It's just amazing listening to him, listening to the concept, the story, the ideas, the thinking and the feeling behind it was just brilliant. So what we've done is we've tidied that up a little bit and put that into audio format. So that's going to be available. If you haven't seen the original video, guys, head over to the Eternal Paradigm Facebook page. The full video is there to see. So it did raise a few, let's say, eyebrows when it was actually aired, because during the live, I was joined by my 4-year-old who was having issues with her brother at the time. And you know how it is, siblings, younger little ones. And we had a few interruptions, which was quite funny. So if you head over to the video on the Facebook page, you'll see all of that. we've tried to tidy that up for the audio version. What's also exciting is here you are also going to get a chance to get an update from Mike on what's been happening. So listen to the episode right towards the end, head over to the Facebook page and Instagram to see what is happening. And also, when we had the conversation, I had such immense feedback from people who were intrigued about Mike's ideas and where he's going with it. And he's actually set a launch date for the comic. Okay. You're going to find out about that as you hear this. And I am so excited because the concept, the idea is just brilliant. And I am so, so pleased to be able to bring this to you. So with no further ado, I'm going to lead in to our conversation. Enjoy.
Hello, my name is Mike Bivens. I have until recently been a hobby content creator, engaging mostly in podcasting spaces, but also experimenting in various other spaces. I am hoping to move into the more professional role here soon with some various projects I have kind of in the fledgling spaces. But today I'm here with our wonderful guest to talk about comic books, creativity, and make-believe.
We are absolutely. And we have an extra co-host here with us today. And we are not, hold on. I should actually introduce myself. So my name's Urmi and I'm the host of Eternal Paradigm. And Mike has previously joined me for an episode, which was amazing because that's how we connected and really got to talk about his kind of connection to creativity, where it comes from. And the whole comic book thing is what really got me because Eternal Paradigm itself looks very much at human experience, where I genuinely feel that make-believe and imagination and our connection to creativity is such a significant part, which is probably why I'm being gate crashed by my 4-year-old now, because this is where the imagination starts, right? And so thank you so much for everyone who's able to watch this now and who's going to watch this later. So Mike was previously just filling us in on where his interest in comic books started. And I was just asking him why. It's a silly question, right? But go for it. Just do it. Tell us why.
Well, the reason I got into comic books, I was at a Goodwill store and there was this large bin that had just been donated of various comic books. And I was about 11 or 12. And I picked through and tried to find something that caught my eye. And I remember finding an issue of Green Arrow. And I picked it up, I flipped through it real quick, and I was like, this seems so cool. I've never, at that point, I had never actually seen a comic book outside of The Simpsons. And so I was excited. Of course, my mom was willing to buy this comic book. I think it was about 5 cents at the Goodwill store. And from there, I've always had an interest in comic books. They fed so well into my love of creativity and make-believe. And I've just been hooked ever since. And I'm so excited to finally, over a decade later, be engaging in the creation of a comic book. So I'm excited to see this project come to fruition as it's been moving forward this year.
That's amazing. I have been unable to share the actual artist impression that you sent over to me, but we are going to be sharing that later on the Eternal Paradigm podcast page. It's such a mouthful. Why did I choose such a long title, honestly? But, this is fascinating because for me, comic books growing up were fascinating. We're having a lot of drama here today, you see. This is what's happening. This is what happens on a live stream. So, right, we're talking comic books again. And for me, comic books were quite possibly... Actually, let me take that back. From growing up, again, I'm going to bring a different dimension to this because, I'm a spiritual junkie and spirituality is a big thing for me. So growing up as, I guess, from a faith perspective, Hinduism itself has lots of almost superhero-like characters. And so that's where I really first started to see this make-believe coming to play. And then obviously my parents, first generation immigrant to the UK, had newsagents. So comic books were always there. And although we were never really allowed to read them, so I had to read boring newspapers. So you can see where my kind of imagination didn't really flourish very much. So tell me, in terms of, I'm just reading some of the comments here, actually. Can you see them too, Mike?
I cannot, no.
Okay, cool. So
I can see them. I've switched over to the comments section.
Cool, perfect. Yeah, so I've got one here from Hermes who's saying the good old days, which is great. And then I've got one from here from Ams who's saying, my brother and I started with Dennis the Menace and then Spider-Man and Batman. And I love that your passion for comic books still continues. So tell us, where is this taking you now? Where are you going to when you are creating and you're in your zone and you're in your element? What happens?
Yeah, absolutely. So I take a lot of creative influences from my friends. And so this world that this comic book is actually taking place in is the same world that I've created and been playing Dungeons and Dragons with my friends for several years now. And so I created this world just as an alternative to the established D&D world, so my friends could go on adventures and we can explore things together. And so a lot of influences on this world came from kind of a cooperative experience with them where we've built this world together as we've played into it. And so a lot of the times when I'm doing this world building, I'm trying to picture like my friends as characters they've created and like how they might have influenced world events or other characters and how beyond the story where they might have gone to and explored. And like from their needs as a character and as a person living in this world, what kind of environmental influences do they need, such as everything down to a flower. If a character needed to be married, well, what are those wedding traditions for their people or the location that they're at? And so I've created even just these flowers that are supposed to be representative of eternal life together in this world. And so that's where a lot of my influence comes from, is engaging in this kind of cooperative experience. In fact, when I was going through, there's a project called World Ember, which happens every December, where it's just basically a world building exercise where you're supposed to hit, I believe it's 5,000 words, 5 or 10,000 words worth of world building content. And I actually streamed almost every moment of December where I was engaging in world building. And so I was able to work with people on Twitch to kind of co-develop this world and take experiences from other people that they were willing to share about, oh, hey, you know, don't forget, like when a mountain and a stream meet, these kinds of influences happen on the geography. And so taking some of that experiences as well and implementing those.
I totally love that. And tell me more about what was your first encounter with D&D? Because we've got some comments coming in here. We've got Archie and Friends, Archie and Jughead, obviously. Also love WW and Superman. And again, Ams has just added in to say, oh my God, D&D, you know, now that's going back. So where did it start for you?
Yeah, my first experience with D&D actually occurred probably, I think about six years ago. I was visiting my father's house and there was a book out about it. His previous partner's son was actually visiting him as well at the same time. And he's like, oh, I've been playing D&D. And I was like, oh, like, I think I've seen that on a TV show or something. Like, I haven't really like sought this out. Like, I knew about his existence. And so we sat down and we just played a quick hour-long session where he's like, hey, just play as this character and let's role play this couple of experiences. And once we got into that role-playing aspect, I was like, oh man, I love this. Like, this is such a great opportunity to just engage in creativity in a way that I haven't really had the opportunity to do, because I had always been, for whatever reason, too reserved to like seek out opportunities like participating in a drama club or a theater class. And so it was a wonderful opportunity to re-engage with creativity in that way.
That's amazing. Yes, I got that. Wonder Woman. Thank you. Yes. Oh, here's a question for you. The eternal ongoing question for anyone into comics. Mike, are you team DC or team Marvel?
Okay, I am. I'm going to have to be honest and say I'm a fanboy of Team Marvel. And I know that's probably a bandwagon opinion. Although DC was the first comic book I ever picked up with Green Arrow, Team Marvel has always just kind of drug me in further into their like world building and the kind of interactions between like the different hero and villain dynamics. So that's where I'm at.
Okay, so who's your favorite all-time villain?
oh man. I hadn't thought about that. I don't know. I don't want to just give an off the cuff answer because then I'm going to come back 30 minutes later and go, oh no, actually it's this one. So I don't know.
That's brilliant. But, you know, like when it comes to the dynamics of villains and heroes in your comic books, what is the dynamic? Because you talk very much about lots of real human emotion and compassion and togetherness and connection. So where is this darker side? And does it even feature in your kind of comic book creations?
Yeah, so this particular comic book is kind of spinning off from the latest campaign that I've played in Dungeons and Dragons, where it is a very dark time in like the history of this world, and we're experiencing great hardship and loss all across the continent of the free peoples, which are humans, elves, and dwarves. And it's kind of like a prelude to the coming destruction and near apocalypse level events that begin to occur, in which the campaign then takes off from. But it is going to be darker in that we're kind of exploring the darker side of humanity a little bit and beginning to see kind of these evil influences. But one thing like I'm trying to keep in mind is like in real life, we're not all so black and white. We're not all just good and all just evil. And so the main characters are, obviously going to be flawed, and they lead very difficult lives. And so making hard decisions, similar to something like Game of Thrones, is something to be expected of who they are as people and kind of guardians of their culture. And so these characters are going to experience both good and evil moments, and they're going to make decisions on both of those. So
thank you. I'm just muting in between because I may get requests for, sweets or biscuits or strange noises even. So that is incredibly, it's almost like it parallels to where we are currently. But you're saying that the campaign has kind of spun off a place where you were at in D&D, but actually globally there are probably so many parallels to what you're creating. I have a question here for you from Ans, which is very relevant. So I'll read it out, but obviously I'm glad you can see it too. So it says, going from the traditional days of buying and having a paper copy of a comic book to books being available through digital facilities, do you see a world where paper comic books can make a comeback? And how do you think you can attract a new audience? Because this is like a time immemorial kind of debate, so to speak. And there is a growing area, just like there is for vinyl, comic books, hard copy, absolutely. So tell us, where are you at on this?
Yeah, and so I definitely want to preface what I'm about to say is like I'm obviously not an industry expert by no means, but I think one thing that we can take away in considering this is that there's always going to be a desire for us as humans to collect things. And I think comic book collecting is going to persist as an active hobby for a lot of people. And I think there are always going to be people who want like the physical edition of something, to collect it, to have it, or even if they're just there to read it, they're going to want to read it physically. I think ultimately we're likely to continue to see a contraction in the physical copies of things like this being made, because digital just makes everything so easy. Like there are just website after website and database after database that just collects these digital copies, and we can view them more cost effective and so much more readily that I think more and more people will turn to this. And if anything, the pandemic has also pushed this forward, where everything being moved to a digital format is probably preferable for a lot of people. But of course, I've also seen some discussion that following the pandemic, people are going to want to move back into those in-person fields. And maybe that also has an effect on our like goods and services, where people want to do it in person or hold something physical again. And so I don't know, well, COVID just puts everything in such a tailspin that it could absolutely reverse course on a lot of the directions we've been going. So I don't know.
You're absolutely right. COVID totally is a game changer. And we do see this switch. And there is an amazingly different experience that we feel. Oh, wow, I'm having a fight with a 4-year-old. But there is a whole different dynamic to holding paper, reading books. And we know this because, scientific studies tell us as well, how that ignites your creative fields compared to what a digital format does. But then also you've just added, the extra dimension of COVID, and actually not having this is also significantly different. So tell us, what are the next steps for you, and what has been, because this is a process, because this has been building up for you for such a long time. And at what stages, I guess before I move on to what's next, is what's happened overall, and how many times have you actually segued into going down that avenue of creating something, or creating a comic book, or even think about doing it? How long did it take you to get to a point where you were like, no, this is happening. There is nothing else that's going to stop me.
I have tried to write a couple of different shorter novels before that take place in this world over the last couple of years, and I'll get about like 10,000 words in, and then I like lose steam. So I actually took some time to reflect on that, and I was like, well, maybe to stretch those writing muscles, maybe something shorter like a comic book is the avenue to go. And I also love the idea of the opportunity to engage so much more of like the visual aspect of it and providing that medium for people's eyes. So I took a look back and reflected on like how much I enjoyed comic books. And so that was the decision to move forward with. And when I decided like I love this world enough to make something out of it, and I wanted to develop it further, that's why I took on the World Ember Challenge in December. And after that, I've started the writing process. It was at the beginning of December, I was dead set on doing the comic book and seeing where it could go.
And what are your hopes for your kind of newfound love, your newfound ambition, your newfound connection?
Yes. My hopes are really just that anybody out there can pick it up and find this story to be interesting, to like or hate the characters, to feel anything about them, really. I just want to create a story that people can connect with to some degree. And that's also been a lot of like what my podcasting has been. It's always been about like finding somebody's story to tell and then exploring that story.
So tell us a little bit more of your podcast and how have those stories, the process of storytelling itself, has that been helpful in your comic book character creation?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first podcast I started is called 5 Questions, and it's paused at the moment while I consider rebranding, and just like I'm also in grad school at the moment, so it's been difficult to manage so many different projects and these different podcasts I have going on, and so it's on pause. But I interviewed activists and advocates about what they do and why they do it, and so it was so much more about finding the person that's in the picket line or protesting somewhere and asking them like, who are you? How did you get involved? And why is this so important to you? And it was fantastic just to hear these passionate stories from people and why they cared about this experience so much and how it relates to them. But the current podcast I have going on is called Silent Journeys. And this is it's a different take in that the audience really only hears me come in at the end to thank them unless the guest has asked for something a little bit more personalized or something that fits their needs as a guest. But most of the time it's somebody comes in and they want to share their mental health story. And so whether that has been a 5-minute rant about their frustrations with anxiety or a 30-minute discussion of coping strategies on what's worked for them to deal with depression, like the mic is open for them to share whatever it is they want to share. And so that has just been really personal experience, having grown up dealing with mental health issues myself and still continuing to deal with those, especially some that have been exacerbated from COVID and lockdowns and being alone. But it's helped me, I guess, get regrounded with other people's lives and understand mental health and the kind of these journeys that people go on a deeper level because of this experience of getting to talk with people really all over the world. I've talked with people from Pakistan. I've had a few guests from India. I've had guests from the UK, Canada. And so just getting to see how these experiences connect everyone around the world has also been something that's been really helpful in just reimagining the way connection works and as the human experience and trying to find ways of like, how can I relate this back to the experiences that these characters might have of being connected to their culture despite having to live isolated away from them.
Thank you for sharing that. And just to add that if you do want to hear Mike's story, please check out his episode on Eternal Paradigm and definitely check out Silent Journeys, because you can see how the podcast, the actual formats are very different, just like Mike said. And the way that the story is kind of told is very different. And that is actually very important, I think. So there's a question here for you. Love the questions. Keep them coming. So it says, to be a writer and come up with innovative, original stories in this day and age gets more and more difficult, especially with social media being on the forefront. So where do you get your inspiration to write? And can you share any potential snippets of a potential story that we can read soon?
Yes. So I remember being 6 or 7 years old when I started that was my first kind of like early memory of being really interested in kind of the world building process and in creating original ideas. I was looking into, my grandpa was very much into linguistics, and he showed me these different like codes and stuff to create your own languages. And he started doing that with me and saying, go create like your own symbols and make your own alphabet and translate it into English. And let's like, look at this. And of course, as being a 6 or 7-year-old, that was just like, I didn't understand anything that was going on. But he encouraged this early world building process without, of course, me realizing what I was actually doing. And so I think I've obviously from a very young age been encouraged to pursue original ideas and creating something without too much outside influence. Of course, I've now moved towards engaging with others and that cooperative process I talked about earlier. As far as the innovative, I think a lot of it comes from that cooperative process of like my friend will come and say like, I want to create this character in your world, but I need to know like what organizations could he be a member of, or like I said, for that marriage, like what are the rituals and stuff. And so like creating that cooperative process with other people and going from there and creating, maybe it's not so much original in that I am cooperating with others, but I think it is kind of an innovative process in that. And a snippet from a potential story. Yes.
Yeah.
The story I want to pursue after this is actually the last novel I tried to create. And it's going to kind of follow a young girl as she's kind of been outcasted by her village because her mom is not from the local area. Her father's a traveling merchant. And so brings the wife back and they have a kid, but the father's never around. And so it's this mom from a foreign land and her young daughter who's been outcasted because they are so different. And she is going to slowly become friends with this kind of spectral force that she finds in this forest. And so it's kind of this relationship building between her and the spectral force, which is in this world, not an acceptable relationship. And so it's going to be her not really realizing what she's doing and coming to terms with this presence that seems to always be around and protecting her. And the story will kind of follow like their journey of friendship and realization of what the spectral force is and kind of the fallout of what happens once others begin to find out that she's breaking these kind of religious codes that have dictated this world before anyone can really remember.
That's fascinating. So is the spectral force almost human in its characteristics but has no form, or does it have a form?
It will not have a form. It is in this world, the spectral force has the potential to take on a physical form, but its natural state is not one with any kind of identifiable physical presence.
That's fascinating, because if anyone is doing anything to connect with their higher self, that sounds like there could be something there. So really excited. Michael, when is that all kind of happening? When is it all going to be available to read? Because I want to know. And so look at this. You're getting messages to say when.
This is fantastic to hear other people engaging and so interested. But I'm excited because this week is actually my spring break. And I have several days set aside this next week to finish out writing this first comic book story. And I think Kickstarter is going to be the best way for me to go about this. And so I'll be trying to go into a Kickstarter campaign pretty soon. And once that campaign is off and starting, I can go ahead and start writing the next story of going back to Wendy, which is the little girl that I was just talking about. And I think that story, one thing I wanted to mention, it just popped back in my head, it's going to talk a lot about like loneliness and being isolated. And so I think it's wonderful to think back on that and apply this to this character, because just having been so isolated this last year and alone, and then kind of when I was young, I didn't have a lot of opportunities to engage in like social atmospheres because of the responsibilities that I had as the oldest sibling of a single working mother who had up to 3 jobs at any point. So kind of relying back on those childhood experiences, but going back or forward, if you will, I'm hoping to begin writing Wendy's story no later than the end of May. I'm hoping to get into writing her story. I have so much of her already written out. Like I said, I think I have 17,000 words that I wrote for her novel. And so I want to consider looking into making that either a graphic novel or turning that more into a short comic book series. So ideally, if everything goes well, this first comic book will be ready to go within 4 or 5 months, maybe 6, depending on how quickly the artist can work and how quickly I can get the Kickstarter campaign up and running. And within that time frame, I would also begin work on Wendy's story.
Okay, so there's not really that much to do then.
I don't think so, but also this is my first experience with comic book creation. So let's hope I can find a mentor in the comic book space that can help guide me through this process.
Oh, that is going to be fascinating. Absolutely amazing. And, again, I just want to echo Am's sentiments there. So wishing you every success, Mike, and love that you're turning your passion into reality, because that is so important. And the fact that you're reflecting on parts of your life and parts of your feelings and experiences to bring that into each of aspects of your character is incredible, because it's not only the power of lived emotion and lived reality, but when you can actually move it beyond yourself and put it out there, the snowball effect of that, that it's going to actually help others in the most profound way, or help people to connect with it, because it's such an empowering thing to be able to do that. But I am really fascinated, though, by the spectral vortex? The spectral force, right? So I'm clearly thinking vortex here. So, but there we go. And probably I'm going to come and pick your brains about that, because I feel like that in itself is a separate conversation, like a really big one. Mm-hmm. So tell me, we are here having quite a funny stroke, semi-serious conversation, right? Mm-hmm. But in real terms, it's spring break. Okay. Mm-hmm. So, hold on. One more question before we go. Comic-Con 21 and 22. I feel quite sad about this, because I love Comic-Con and I don't know what's going to happen. And I don't know if you know what's going to happen. So.
No. WonderCon, for example, I know that they are switching. They're going to do digital or a virtual version this year again, too. So I'll definitely WonderCon. I'm excited about that one. We'll be going, it being virtual. I don't know. I think that would be a fantastic idea to go to Comic-Con the next time that it's actually in person. I would love to be able to be in that convention space again. I guess it just depends on finances and when exactly it happens.
Yeah, let's watch this space, right? Yeah, cool. So tell me next, if this was real spring break for you, mm-hmm. What would it really look like? Because it wouldn't look like this. I know that much.
I mean, are we talking outside of pandemic times?
Outside of pandemic times, okay. What is spring break really like?
Oh, man, I've been in college for so long, or in the higher education setting, because I have been working in higher ed the last couple of years as well. And so, in the past, what I've done is I've just escaped to Canada in the opposite direction of where so many other people go. People like to go for the warmth, and I let's go up north where it's cold. And so I've gone to Canada for the majority of my spring breaks. Outside of COVID times, I don't know, because this is my first year of grad school, so things are so different that I have no idea what I would be doing normally for this spring break. And if I wasn't completely obsessed with content creation and wanting to spend all of my time engaging in different spaces like that, it's hard to say. It's so hard to say.
I have a question. What are the kind of key emotions that you find yourself turning to when you're creating your characters?
I think I try most of the time to enter with a blank slate. I have a long list of just like the names of like flowers or trees or locations. And I try to enter with kind of a blank emotional slate, picking one of those, create the basic idea of it. And then that's where I start to add in the emotions of like, how might people engage with this location, or what could the significance of this be? And then drawing, like I said, and incorporating those emotions from that point and kind of building off from there.
Okay. And so the other thing is where does the whole kind of nature element come into this? Is it through your experience with D&D? Is it from your personal experience? Or is it because, again, is there a spiritual kind of underlying connection there?
that kind of spiritual connection does come into the primordial, like beginning creation of this world. The creators, it was kind of, the world is supposed to be born out of, so there's three creators that created this world, and everything in this world, particularly the people, were created as a result of their kind of essence. And so there's anger, and then there's like kind of happiness and good, and then there's kind of this neutrality. So each of these creators are represented by one of those three emotions, and that's reflective in the people and the kind of world that they've created. And so there's like three major continents, and each of the creators chose one of those places for their people. And they kind of had, they agreed to allow each other the freedom to influence and change the landscape to fit their own personalities and preferences. And so there's major differences in the nature of each of these three continents in this world. I think, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I see where you're going with it. Obviously, everything you say to me, I have to fit it back into my own kind of chasm of experience, if you see what I mean. So it's like, I get that. Okay, there are kind of various things, and the spirituality aspect kind of comes into play. And I have a guest again. Okay.
Can I press this?
Yes, we're just sorting out a Netflix situation here. So in terms of your comic books and in terms of your the writing that you're doing, what age groups are you specifically looking to target? Because that is going to be quite significant. And, you know, because Harry Potter's for everyone.
Right. Definitely. I think I've written the content as far as the writing, such as the attempted novels and this comic book, have very much been directed at a more mature audience. I want to be able to tell these stories using language and emotions that are a bit more complex. And I wanted to show this struggle in more of an authentic way. The way I've reasoned it in the past is I thought that writing this for the general everybody audience or writing this for a younger audience, I'm going to have to simplify things or cut out some of the intensity of these struggles and these emotions, just because when you're writing for a younger audience, you do need to make things, I think it's important to reflect them in an accurate way, but it's also, I don't know, I've struggled with feeling like, is this totally authentic in the way that this character would experience this if I'm having to write this for everyone from ages 5 to 100. And so I've aimed this at a more mature, a little bit older audience that have experienced a broader range of emotions and more complex thoughts.
Yeah, and I think that makes sense. And the fact that when you're in your creative space, you're actually reflecting on who the end user is and what you want them to think and feel and how you want them to connect with the narrative is incredible. So that's cool. So tell us, Mike, what's happening for you this year? You've talked about the comic book, you've talked about the writing, the Kickstarter. So there's a fair few things there, right? Yeah. What other major shifts are happening?
Yeah, so I ultimately made the decision that I want to leave higher ed and transition more into the creative content professional world. And so May will be the closing of my short-lived career in higher education. And I'm particularly excited about it. I think it's the right move. And one of the things I've positively pulled out of this pandemic is an extensive amount of time to reflect and consider who I am and what I want and what my interests and how those align professionally. And so thanks to COVID, I will be leaving higher ed and entering into content. And so that is obviously quite the major shift for me because I won't be working for somebody anymore. I guess working for my audience would be a good way of putting it. But transitioning more into that kind of freelance, be your own boss kind of atmosphere is something that's definitely hanging over my head all the time. And I think that's part of the reason why I'm pushing to do a lot of my different projects. And I've definitely given up some personal time and time connecting with others to begin engaging in these projects right now so I can prepare for that change in May. And so, I've got 2 current podcasts, hoping to bring back 5 questions, bringing a third podcast while engaging in freelance services and trying to broaden my skill set to be more prepared for that major employment shift that's coming.
Again, so there's a lot happening. Yeah. But this is cool because do you feel that ultimately that this aligns with where you need to be and the time that you've had to reflect has has just made things really, really clear. Oh, and we have another question.
Yeah, I do think so. As I said, I've been interested and pushed to explore creativity at a very young age. And I think that's persisted without me even realizing that's what I was doing. Like, I remember when I was a kid, I actually got in trouble. I remember very clearly in my 6th year, I got in trouble because I would spend every recess in a corner reading a book instead of going out and exercising. And I was always deeply interested in these like fantastical novels where these brand new worlds were being created and these spaces were filled up with original ideas and characters and personalities. And so I've always been fascinated by the fantastical. And I think the opportunity to engage in these spaces is, 5-minute warning.
5-minute warning.
To wrap up that answer, yes, I think this aligns with who I am and what I am so much more passionate about. So I'm extremely excited to hopefully make this my actual full-time gig of creating content that has meaning and has connection with people's lives and their emotions and their thoughts.
That's amazing. Thank you. We have got a brilliant question here. Which superhero or villain were you most fascinated by growing up? Also, random open discussion. How interesting was it to the film Joker, where the psychology behind how his character was actually born? Because this is happening very, very frequently now. Mm-hmm. And do you think that we'll see more stories about the story behind the villain? Do you think it will make society more forgiving when they see the journey they have taken, which has resulted in them becoming a villain? Because this is big, right?
Mm-hmm.
Go for it.
As it happens, I think Joker was the most interesting villain to me. In every Batman movie I saw, my mom is a fan of Batman. She owns most of the Batmans, I believe, on DVD. And so I've watched all of them. And the Joker story being retold and different, I think that's what made it so interesting to me was like, it also was like confusing as a kid, seeing characters' backstories being rewritten constantly. Like that was a very confusing idea for me. But as I've grown older, I've actually come to appreciate how comic books rewrite characters' stories. But seeing that in the cinematic world where the Joker has obviously been like the main villain of Batman consistently throughout the cinematic universe, seeing his story written in different ways definitely made him the most interesting villain as far as my own like personal taste goes. Cool. I do think that we will begin to see more stories of, behind the villain. Look at true crime. True crime is easily the most popular podcasting genre, and people love learning about the serial killer. People love learning about these kidnappings. It's a story. It fascinates us because it's such a divergence from the norm and such a divergence from like acceptable thinking. And we're fascinated with things that scare us or make us concerned or make us rethink our safety, as it almost seems counter to the human experience to want to explore the things that make you uncomfortable. And yet exploring those very things are what we're so drawn to. And so I think we'll see more and more stories behind the villains in every space. So podcasting it's blown up with true crime, and I think more movies will be produced, more comic books, more everything. I think we'll begin to see that behind the villain story.
I wholeheartedly with you there, totally. And whether society will start to become different or forgiving is a whole different debate, right? That I think I'm not too sure about, but the rest, yes. But ultimately, I think we're going to wrap up now. Thank you so much, Mike, for joining me. And thank you for everyone who's watching, for your questions, for listening, for watching this back later and everything. How are you with everything, Mike? All good?
I'm all good. Thank you so much for joining in, everyone. I do want to say you can find me and all of the content I engage with on my website, msbivens, B as in boy, V as in Victor.com. Everything I do is collected there and provided links to everything that I engage with, even my appearances like this I try to talk about. So you can find me there. Thank you so much.
Perfect. And I'll definitely be putting that up on the Eternal Paradigm page as well. Cool. Thank you, guys. Thank you. And thank you, Tom, by the way.
Hey everybody, it's Mike. I wanted to pop in with a quick update about my comic. It's now fully drafted and the editing is virtually finished, and I'm producing the initial sketch right now. I've set up a newsletter, which you can find on my website, msbivens.com. This newsletter will follow along the campaign as I take it to Kickstarter, and in it you'll get behind the scenes information, bits about my world that I've created, and character profiles, and so much more. So if you want to learn more about Alorum and the characters, you can get that information there. As for the Kickstarter, it's going to launch June 1st. And finally, for everybody that's already expressed interest in The Last of the Mastiff Riders, I just want to say thank you. This has been an incredible journey, and I have learned so much in producing this comic, and I can't wait to see all the new lessons I learned going forward. And that's it for my message.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Eternal Paradigm. I'd like to take this opportunity just to remind you that your comments, your feedback, and your listenership is incredibly valued.